Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Lawsplaining the Interwebs live from CONmunity here in Amarillo, Texas. I am your host, Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. And with me today are the fine folks of CONmunity. And you guys watching online, of course, can't see them, but there are several people here. And yep. See? I'm not lying. But we are here, and I am here to talk about the Vic Mignogna situation. To anybody who is not aware of it, we've got about 1 hour for this panel. I'm going to talk about the situation that's been going on. There's been some interesting activity today, and after that, I'm going to take questions from the live audience here. If you have questions on the YouTube audience, I am monitoring lightly the chat, and you are welcome to ask a question through the super chat feature, but I would ask that you keep the just fun comments about it to a minimum. I know that the connection is a bit hit or miss, but it does have potential to go faster. I don't know what's, we'll have to see how it goes. We'll have to see how it goes, but I am recording this as well. So I will post up the video in a little bit. All right. So for those of you who don't know, Vic Mignogna is a voice actor recently featured in the movie Dragon Ball Super Broly. He is the voice of Broly. He's also the voice of Edwin Elric from Full Metal Alchemist. So many of you have heard his voice and know who he is. Starting on January 16th, with the release of Dragon Ball Super Broly, Vic Mignogna, there was a concurrent campaign, we'll call it, a concurrent campaign to remove Vic from his voice acting gigs at Defamation and Rooster Teeth, both based here in Texas. The campaign started on Twitter from someone named Kalen Saucedo. It was accompanied by the hashtag #KickVic. That seemed to really kick off the whole event. And over the next couple weeks, Vic Mignogna would be routinely, how do we call this, live roasted on Twitter. He would be accused of several acts of impropriety at conventions, including the very egregious act of hugging and maybe kissing on the cheek someone without their consent. So many people who know Vic or have interacted with him know that he does tend to be very close. He tends to display affection to people around him. So there is some credibility to the idea that he maybe hugged someone without their consent if they came up to his table to get an autograph or something like that. Over the next couple weeks, things sort of spiraled on and on, along with the popularity of the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie. And eventually, he was confronted with what I would call as a lawyer, a more credible accusation. The Twitter accusations I refer to them as not credible, one, because they're very hard to verify. Twitter has this veil of anonymity about it. Anybody can name themselves anything on Twitter. They can use dummy email addresses to create those accounts, and it's very hard to verify anything anyone says. So the first sort of more credible accusation came from, as best I can tell, a person by the name of Jamie Markey. Jamie Markey is a voice actress who also works on Funimation properties, and Jamie accused Vic of some inappropriate behavior in the lobby of Funimation Studios, namely that he pulled on her hair, pulled her close, and whispered something sexual into her ear, although she was unable to recall what that was. And then she said she subsequently removed him from her person with some sort of comment, although she couldn't recall what that was either. The next day, I believe, Monica Rial, who is the voice of Bulma, came out with an accusation, but she did not name what the accusation was. She merely said that something happened to her as well involving Vic Mignogna, and she was not clear on any specific details. Over the next couple weeks, it would come out that she had a story alarmingly similar to Jamie Markey's story. Again, it involved playing with hair, tugging hair, pulling her close, whispering something into her ear. Finally, there was another accusation that I would call a credible accusation from a cosplayer named Jesse Pridemore. Jesse Pridemore had a very similar story that accompanied a story of alleged rape by Todd Haberkorn. Now, that allegation of rape by Todd Haberkorn has since been denied. Todd Haberkorn is also pursuing legal action against Jesse Pridemore. That is a story I can maybe get to at a later point or tomorrow. But in that accusation against Todd Haberkorn, she used that to transition to an accusation against Vic Mignogna. Again, that he grabbed her hair, tugged it, pulled her close, and whispered something into her ear. So, once those accusations came out, he was dropped from Defamation Studios officially. They tweeted about it early February. I'm not sure of the exact date, but in their tweet, they did mention that he was following an investigation. They had cut all ties with Vic Mignogna, and when they did cut all ties with Vic Mignogna, they said that they do not support harassment of any kind. So Funimation made a statement about that. Rooster Teeth cut ties with Vic Mignogna. However, their statement was very bare bones, just stating that they would no longer be working with him. That's the situation that we had up until, I guess, I got involved. Many people ask me, my channel does not cover specifically anime news or anything like that. I cover legal topics all over the place. I've been covering the rift in the comics community over the past year, and so many people who are fans of both comics and anime reached out to me and asked me to start looking into this and talking about it. I invited Vic on my show. He did not come on my show, which is probably a good thing for him. And however, upon talking to him, I was able to link him up with a law firm down in Texas, and I was also able to start a GoFundMe, which the people watching at home know is now over $100,000 raised, and Vic is pursuing legal action. Now, I'm not permitted to talk too much about what's going on specifically in regards to the legal action, but let me just say that I think today, the legal action got a lot more real and a lot more interesting for about 4 people. And I think on Monday, it's going to get a lot more real and hit a lot closer to home for the rest of them. We'll see what comes out about that. But Texas has very specific laws that need to be followed in regards to defamation actions. That's one of the largest of the claims. Vic says that most of the statements made about him are false, especially the ones that ended up getting him removed from his employment. And I think he says all of the statements about him are false, but I don't want to go on record saying that specifically. Yes, definitely the statements of the hair pulling, he's disputed all of that as far as I can tell. But of course, we won't know exactly what the dispute is until the lawsuit comes out. But if you have not been following this, I suggest going back and watching my videos on it, because I've laid out potential legal strategies and I've talked about all of the people who could be involved in this. And there's probably about 15 identifiable parties right now. For example, you have Monica Rial, Jesse Pridemore, and Jamie Markey, as I've mentioned. Also, Monica Rial's fiance, Ron Toye, who has been very vocal on Twitter about this. You have potentials with Sean Schemmel and Chris Sabat, the voices of Goku and Vegeta, respectively. Both of them have been kind of quiet, but early on did make some specific statements. You have Samantha Inu Hart, who is another voice actress, who allegedly participated in the investigation against Vic Mignogna. However, following that, did claim that she was swatted. If you know what swatting is, she claimed she was swatted. However, when there was no police report that reflected a swatting, and the pictures that she posted of the alleged swatting were from her own Facebook page from 2016. Oh, okay, swatting, sorry. Yes, if you don't know, if you guys have a question or whatever, stop me, raise your hand, like school. 1 second, so first, a swatting is an event where you call the police and you tell them that there's a very dangerous activity happening in a residence or somewhere else, with the idea of getting a SWAT team to actually show up. They're extremely dangerous events because SWAT teams are going into a situation where they believe that someone is in danger, and people have died from them in the past year, where the police, feel threatened and then they shoot the person who is involved. Not a good place to be. I'm sorry, you had a question. All right. Yes, sorry, I'm not used to doing this with a live audience here in studio or at a convention, so feel free to stop me and raise hands. I teach, so I'm used to that as well. Samantha Inuhart reported a swatting on Twitter, but when people dug into it, they found out that the pictures that she posted of it were, again, from 2016, kind of casting doubt on her credibility in that respect. The other parties that could be involved in this lawsuit would be Funimation Studios themselves for their statement about Vic Mignogna. You have a potential target in Rooster Teeth. Even though they didn't say much, some of their voice actors have been very vocal on Twitter, and that might be enough to bring them into a lawsuit. You have Kaylin Saucedo, who I mentioned earlier, who could certainly be brought in, and I hope she is. I hope she is brought into that lawsuit personally, but we'll see on that. And you have Anime News Network and IO9, which are two online publications which have run stories about Vic Mignogna that misrepresented situations and failed to represent his entire answers to them in the course of in the case of IO9. IO9 reached out to Vic to verify some of the events. He responded to all of their questions, and they reproduced about 10% of what he said, which might be seen as unfair, might not. But the interesting thing about these is this gets really deep into the backstory and the lore of all this. The people who wrote the articles for Anime News Network and IO9 both have connections to the person who kicked this off, which is Kaylin Saucedo, through a YouTube channel she was associated with earlier called Channel Awesome. So the weird underlying possible lawsuit to all of this is something called civil conspiracy. And that's when any two people get together and honestly discuss furthering a civil cause of action or a tort. So in this case, defamation. If two people got together and decided to create a defamation campaign on Twitter, that is civil conspiracy, and those people could be liable for any sort of damages that would result from the conspiracy. The damages to Vic Mignogna are, of course, his loss of jobs at Rooster Teeth and Funimation, but similarly, he's been disinvited from several conventions. Something like 17 conventions have canceled his appearances, which, as you guys probably know, amounts to quite a bit of income for a popular voice actor. But that's the situation right now. That's what's been going on. If there are questions from the audience here about anything I've just said, I'll take them now. Otherwise, I'm going to hit some of the questions that have come in online. All right. Okay, online audience, I'm going to limit these to questions about Vic. I'm sorry. Tom S.A. Savage says, kick Vic, people like this think this is fake and it's just 5 people in a middle school. Okay, then. Well, yeah. I mean, that's how everything is. Let's see. Dragonfist900 says, hey, Nick, is it okay if I send you a pic for Ty? Of course. Ty, for those of you in the audience here, Ty Beard is the lawyer that Vic hired. His law firm is Beard, Harris, Bullock, and Hughes. They're based out of Tyler. And they are a pretty high-powered corporate litigation firm. The people on the other side of this sort of event are in constant denial that they're real or that they actually do litigation, but I can assure you they do and are very, very good at it. So that'll be interesting. One question from Lily Liver says, can deleting tweets count as deleting evidence? Yes, it absolutely can. Sorry, I've got to weed through some of them, and they're very funny. Mythos Irving says, swatting is attempted murder. Let's be real. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so that's the questions we have here. So that's the background story of what's been going on, but I'd like to talk about what's been going on over the past 2 days. What we were alerted to today, I don't remember who sent me the direct message, but thank you so much for pointing this out. It appears that Vic Mignogna has been dropped from the credits of the Dragon Ball Super movie on iTunes and on Google Play, which is very, very interesting considering he is the title character's voice. I reached out to Funimation on Twitter, and they did respond saying it was a mistake and they're getting it corrected. So I do want to give Funimation a little bit of props for correcting that obvious mistake that could have definitely happened by pure accident. Although I will say that an Apple employee reached out to me under the condition of anonymity and said that Apple does not allow mistakes on their listings and that they have to strictly follow what is submitted by the company. And if they choose not to follow it, they actually, like if an employee chooses not to follow what's on the listing, they get a disciplinary action, even for a typo. So I really do hope Funimation takes that up with their Apple contact. It would be a real shame if there was some sort of mistake from an Apple employee and it didn't come from Funimation directly. But Funimation has corrected that. I alerted them that it's also a problem on Google Play. And it also seems to be a problem with his listing on Ruby from Rooster Teeth. So either someone at Apple has a very big problem with Vic Mignogna and is willing to risk disciplinary action for it, or there might be some interesting things going on behind the scenes at Rooster Teeth and Funimation Studios. Unfortunately, we won't know till discovery, which is coming. Do you guys know what discovery is? Should I go through the civil process of how a lawsuit works? Would that be helpful for you guys? All right. So the way a lawsuit works, actually, I can talk very specifically about how a defamation lawsuit works in Texas. Okay, so Texas has this very interesting law called the Texas Defamation Mitigation Act. And the Texas Defamation Mitigation Act requires someone who is accusing someone else of defamation to send out letters demanding retractions to try and mitigate the defamation that's already occurred. So, for example, we'll use a hypothetical. Ron Toye, Monica Rial's husband, or not husband, I keep saying that. Monica Rial's fiance, Ron Toye. He has been on a barrage against Vic Mignogna on Twitter for the past several days, despite certain YouTube lawyers urging him quite a bit to get a lawyer and to shut his mouth because it could go very badly for him. But Ron Toye, for example, has been talking quite a bit on Twitter. So what you would do with a Texas Defamation Mitigation Act compliance is to send Ron a letter and probably copy him via email as a courtesy so that he would get it right away. And on this letter, it'll say something like, you are requested forcefully to immediately delete all defamatory statements that you have made about someone and to make no further statements about it. It's almost like what's called a cease and desist letter, but it goes ahead and demands retractions of previous statements as well. Once you send out this letter, if someone like Ron Toye were to refuse to comply with the letter and Vic were to prevail in a civil action against him, you qualify for something called exemplary damages. Exemplary damages says, okay, the defamation cost this much. Now we're going to multiply the amount that you owe by 2 or 3 times and tack that on to the lawsuit. So now you have exemplary damages, and it just skyrockets the amount that could be won on a judgment. So if there's anybody who happens to have gotten a Texas Defamation Mitigation Act letter, if you got one, you might want to retract those statements. It'd be a good idea to not have those statements out there as soon as possible, but that's just me, and I'm not giving you legal advice at all. With that being said, once those letters go out, another type of letter will also go out, and this is sort of the if you imagine NASA, right? When a rocket's about to launch, you got T-minus 1 minute, T-minus 10 seconds. This is your 10-second countdown to lawsuit letter. It's called a spoliation of evidence letter. A spoliation of evidence letter would suggest that you cannot delete any evidence. If you spoil or delete any evidence that's out there that may be requested on discovery, the court is permitted to make a negative inference about whatever is deleted. So this is this is something that became really, really important with electronic discovery, where you're going through emails, you're going through tweets, you're going through private messages and text messages, because it's so easy to remove that. However, forensic digital evidence teams that are employed by large law firms are able to find out where things are deleted through all sorts of different methods, but usually just by being very thorough and careful. When they find those deleted things, they tend to make a very, very big deal about it. So if anybody out there receives one of those spoliation of evidence letters, you can imagine that you're about to be sued probably within days. Just in case anybody were to happen to receive any of those in the very near future. I think that might be on the horizon. But so you can imagine that as the rocket takeoff countdown, and once those letters go out, we'll see probably legal action very soon. If I had to guess, we'll see actual lawsuits being filed in the next week to week and a half against the people who are involved. And as soon as those drop, I will be reading all of them live on stream. We'll be going through, laughing along with it, and just seeing how this whole thing unfolds. I think it'll be very, very interesting. But so the next part, how the lawsuit actually starts once that spoliation letter goes out, is the next step would be receiving a summons and complaint. The summons and complaint will tell you that you are being sued. It will lay out the list of factual allegations made by a party, in this case, for example, Vic Mignogna, against another potential party. We can use a different hypothetical, and we could say it's Funimation Studios. So for Funimation Studios, they would allege the facts of the situation. They would talk about any potential investigation. They would talk about any communications that Vic received from Funimation Studios, and then they would go ahead and they would lay out how they believe those actions constitute different civil torts. I already mentioned defamation. There's another category of defamation called business defamation. Business defamation involves impugning someone within their course of work. So if they said, for example, that Vic's activity at a convention, which would arguably be within the course of his conduct, was inappropriate, then they would say that was business defamation, because that's hampering his specific business. The elements of defamation and business defamation are quite different, and the remedies are very, very different as well. The other one would be, of course, something related to potentially a wrongful termination, although that seems unlikely. And finally, if they can find evidence of it, collusion or conspiracy. Not like the pretend collusion of Trump and the Russians. I say pretend collusion as a joke just because they haven't produced any evidence, but there is quite a bit of evidence of collusion or conspiracy amongst voice actors who are employed by Funimation Studios. So with that, they can use what's already out there in the existing network to make what's called a prima facie case, or a case on the face of the evidence of collusion or conspiracy. That collusion or conspiracy would allow them to add Funimation to whatever other civil actions are out there for the voice actors or anyone that they've been speaking to. Once they get that complaint, Funimation will have 21 days to answer that complaint. And they'll have to go through and either admit or deny, paragraph by paragraph, everything that's alleged. At that point, we move into a phase called discovery. And once that summons and complaint happens, Vic's lawyers will basically have 90 days to start demanding all sorts of communications between Funimation and whoever they want. They'll be able to demand their internal communications. And in Texas, almost nothing is protected from that discovery. So they won't be able to sit there and say, well, this has some sensitive information in it. They'll have to prove why that information is sensitive, and Vic's lawyers will probably get to see that information anyway and make an argument about whether or not it should be public. Discovery in Texas is actually public information. They can't seal it. So anything that Funimation or their voice actors have communicated, maybe about fans or about people that they don't like, or other people in the industry or other companies, all that becomes very, very public. And I know there are several people on the YouTube scenes who would love to spread that information around. So we'll kind of see how that goes as well. But I think that'll be very, very interesting. Once that discovery phase kicks off, the other thing that can happen is, Funimation will have a chance to respond with motions to dismiss and things like that. Those motions, if you win them, they're a one-shot win. But in the meanwhile, as those motions are running, discovery will be occurring, including the opportunity to depose anybody who's out there. Depositions are where a lawyer gets to ask questions to someone for 3 to 4 hours, and they have to answer every single question. They don't get to say no. They don't get to say, I don't want to answer. I mean, they can say that all they want, but at the end of the day, they still have to answer under oath, and if they don't, they're held in contempt of court and could be fined or could be actually jailed, which would be really embarrassing. So that's what happens. And then from there, it's the full process of a lawsuit. It really could take up to a year to 2 years to fully resolve this for Vic Mignogna. So there's a lot of stuff that can happen in the meanwhile. But does anybody have any questions about that process or what that looks like? Yes. So the question for the YouTube audience was, how difficult is a suit like this case? It's going to depend on each of the defendants. Like I said, right now, Vic has potentially 15 to 20 different defendants that could all be brought in separate lawsuits, and that they're in separate jurisdictions. But defamation suits are difficult to win. They're difficult to win normally. The interesting thing about Vic's case is that the people who are accused of defamation have persisted with their defamation long past their initial statements in very public ways on Twitter. And all of those statements have been archived, they've been screenshot. Vic's attorney has access to pretty much all of them. So normally they are very, very difficult, because if you have, say, one statement from one person to another person behind closed doors, that can be very, very damaging depending on who it is. But when you have these statements that are both behind closed doors and then continuing the same statements over and over on Twitter, they get easier and easier and easier. One of the elements of defamation that makes it so difficult for someone like Vic, who might be considered a public figure, because he has quite a few fans. I mean, he has 100,000 followers on Twitter, and millions of people watch English-dubbed anime, so a lot of people do know who he is. There's an argument about whether he is a public figure or not, but public figure doctrine raises the bar on a defamation case, because we should be allowed to criticize people who are in the public eye, right? We should be able to say that Trump's an idiot or that Obama's a racist or whatever we want to say, right? It doesn't really matter. We should be able to levy those criticisms at public people. They chose to be in public. That's why they're there. So defamation has a higher bar for them, and it's called actual malice. So if you have to prove that the person not only knew that the statement, not only that the person made a false statement that caused damage, but that they knew that statement was false when they made it. That's the malice part. Now, the way you prove malice gets really interesting, because how do you prove someone knew something? They don't always say, well, I knew it was false. But one of the people I mentioned is Jamie Markey. Jamie Markey tweeted out to someone else in response to their question about Vic Mignogna. She said, I want his head, I want his balls, right? So when she when she makes that statement, we have an idea that if she's making a false statement attached to that level of public anger towards someone, that maybe there was some malice involved, that maybe they had an ulterior motive for posting the statements that they made. That's not a good thing for them. For Funimation, it's a little bit different. Funimation, they would have to show malice in a different way, because companies don't have emotions the way people do. So they would have to show that Funimation's statement regarding an investigation was false. Of course, Funimation would know if their investigation statement was false. The The other thing they would need to know is if Funimation's subsequent statement about not supporting harassment, if that could be linked to Vic Mignogna and therefore be false as well. So that's how you would prove this case. That's what's difficult, and that's what that discovery process is all for, because the legal team for Vic will have access to all of those communications. And if they want to avoid that malice part, they better not delete anything. Because if they delete anything and Vic's lawyers are able to find evidence that it was deleted, you could infer malice from the deletion. Yes, sir? In Vic's case, no lawsuit has actually been served upon the other parties to my knowledge. So right now we're at the stage of those letters. Those letters will probably be going out in the next day or two. Well, today's Friday, so probably early next week, if I had to guess. It all depends. The difference in this case versus a normal case is how this is happening in real time so fast. Vic has a 20-year career in anime, and in the course of 3 weeks, that was just shattered completely by these tweets. And then they didn't stop. They kept going and are attempting to get him further removed from further conventions and have further ill will amongst the public for him. So with that, a law firm has to respond very quickly. The statute of limitations on defamation is actually, I believe, 2 years in Texas. Maybe it's 1 year, but in any case, a normal defamation case, the defamation occurs, the damage is done, and the person then consults an attorney at some point when they realize the fallout. For Vic's situation, since it was happening in real time, he had to get an attorney, they had to get up to speed with everything that was going on, and then get a lawsuit out. Frankly, to have a lawsuit go out within a couple weeks of hiring a firm would be really, really abnormal. But I assume they're trying because they've got to stop what's happening if they want to salvage his career and reputation. So that's why I think we'll be seeing some action on it in the next week or so. And for all I know, I mean, stuff could have happened yesterday. I was on a plane all day, so who knows? But yeah, so that's entirely possible. All right, were there any other questions before I go on? I'm going to check the YouTube comments and see if there's anything here. Let's see. All right, Bloodthirster Barry. I love YouTube names, by the way. Says, hey, Nick, can you go through in detail the difference between defamation and business defamation? Yeah, I can do that quickly. The main difference is that a normal case of civil defamation involves one person defaming another person. It has nothing to do specifically with their business-to-business interactions. So it's just, for example, some people have said that Vic Mignogna is a pedophile because of his interaction with fans. Saying that someone is a pedophile could easily be argued to say they're guilty of some sort of sexual assault against a minor. All right, so that would damage someone's reputation both in their business, potentially, but it would definitely damage their personal reputation. You're accusing someone of a serious crime, especially right now. Pedophilia is all over the place in the news. Over the past couple years, we've seen kind of an uptick in reporting on it. So it's a really, really damaging claim to someone. That's what civil defamation looks like, is if a person on the street sees Vic Mignogna and hears that he's a pedophile, they're going to have a negative reaction about him. Business defamation is defaming someone in the way that they conduct business in their industry. So, for example, if someone were to say, hypothetically, that Vic Mignogna is a bad voice actor to work with because he never turns in his recordings on time, he doesn't manage his recording situation well, they always need heavy edits or something, and if that were false, that would be damaging to his voice acting profession. Now, I haven't seen any allegations like that right now, so that's why I'm using it as a hypothetical. Of course, for him, the business defamation side comes from other voice actors accusing him of activity at conventions specifically. But let's say, again, the hypothetical of he's bad at doing his job, that's business defamation. and then you have to show malice for pretty much all business defamation. It has a higher bar, like even if you're not a public figure. But once you do, the damages of it are kind of presumed. You don't have to prove damages in these types of defamation cases because the allegations are so serious and the damage to business is immediate and you can't measure it. Because we know that Vic was dropped from Funimation and Rooster Teeth in this many conventions. What we don't know is how many studios were thinking about hiring Vic to do something, or like commercials were thinking about paying Vic to run a commercial or something like that. We don't know how many of them were looking at that and then decided not to. We only know about specific people he was working with that have withdrawn their offers. So since you can never tell who would have done something, that's why damages are presumed and they don't have to be proven in these contexts. But again, the main difference between defamation and business defamation is one is the business aspect is specifically in regards to their conduct in their industry and how it would impact their ability to do work and for other people to work with him. Let's see. PSA, lower your resolution and lag behind a few seconds for a smoother experience. Yeah, I know that the upstream here in the auditorium is not, it's not consistent. It spikes really high and then it drops down a little bit. So I do apologize. I'll try and lower the bitrate tomorrow for the other panels. Let's see. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to do my normal show tonight at 11. It really depends on what the internet is like at my hotel. Paul Delaney says, with the other side nuking their social media due to impending lawsuits, how screwed are they? Also, hail Grand Inquisitor Rekieta and the Emperor protects. Thank you very much. If they're actually deleting their social media, they could be in a lot of trouble. Again, retracting statements, if they delete some of those statements and retract them, that might be understandable. If they just delete the statements or delete their social media outright, they could wind up in quite a bit of trouble because the court would be able to draw a negative inference. Also, Twitter doesn't let you delete things. This is a public service announcement to everybody. When you delete something from Twitter, it's only gone from public display. It is not gone from the internet. Twitter keeps that stuff for something like 8 years, just in case it's subpoenaed, just in case law enforcement ever needs it, all sorts of reasons that they keep that information. So there is no deleting from Twitter. There is no deleting from Facebook until several years down the road. Same with YouTube. All of these social media companies have to keep this stuff. Yeah, okay. All right. To the lady in the second row, will you please stop being so distracting? Just kidding. The beautiful lady, yes. Very, very lovely. Very lovely. Mr. Joshua 93 says, can you explain tortious interference? I can. Tortious interference, there are two types of tortious interference that Vic Mignogna might be able to levy as a cause of action against some people. One is tortious interference with contract, and the other is very different. It's a very different claim, and that's tortious interference with prospective business relations. Okay, briefly, tortious interference with a contract is when you know someone has a contract with someone else, and then you act in a way with the intent of interfering with that contract. So if you go ahead and contact the other person and try to get that contract to be breached, that's a very specific element of tortious interference with a contract. They have to breach the contract. Now, breaching a contract involves breaking it, not just backing out of a contract in a way that they would be allowed to break it. So it really depends on what's written specifically in the contract as to whether or not there's a breach. But so then that's the third element, is breach. And then the fourth element would be damages resulting from that breach. So that third or fourth, let me just restate them all. Knowledge of the contract, action intending to interfere with the contract, actual interference or breach with the contract, and then damages resulting from that breach. Now, damages is pretty easy because whenever you have a contract and someone interferes and it's broken, you have damages. The question is always whether it's worth it to pursue it. I mean, if I have damages because I agreed to give a guy $100 if he'd send me a certain movie or something like that, and then he breaches it, my damages are $100, but a lawsuit would cost like, 10 grand. So there's not really a point in something small like that. But if we're talking about employment contracts, if we're talking about contracts with conventions, interfering with those could be very, very damaging to someone. So that's how that goes. And the damages on that are not limited to just the specific damages from the contract. They're also limited to any damages that can be related, reasonably related to the contract. So again, for conventions, they're a large source of income for voice actors because people pay to get autographs and to meet these voice actors, and they can make thousands of dollars a day at the convention. So those would be counted in damages if you could show a specific intent to breach a contract with a specific entity. Now, with conventions, how you would show this is, for example, if there was someone sending direct messages to organizers of conventions, or maybe if there were a bunch of convention organizers out there, one of whom was really smart and went on a lawyer's live stream and told him that a bunch of convention managers got together and decided not to invite Vic Mignogna. Getting together and deciding to interfere with a contract could be a really stupid move, especially if any of that was laid out in an email or a text message. So that would be evidence of attempting to interfere with a contract. Now, the other type of tortious interference is, it's a little bit different because it doesn't require knowledge of a contract. This is that business defamation that I was talking about is actually part of tortious interference with business prospects. Or I guess it falls under the category of business defamation. But basically, you're saying that this person did this thing, it damages my reputation in the industry, and then it ruins my chance at getting business in places where I didn't have a contract, but where I might otherwise be able to get business. So that's the two types of tortious interference with contract, and it really depends person to person how Vic Mignogna would be able to bring those. What would be really interesting, of course, I haven't talked a lot about tortious interference with a contract, but I know several of Vic Mignogna's fellow voice actors who have been talking about him would have knowledge of that contract. And even ones who haven't been so public about their conversations about Vic Mignogna, but might be talking behind the scenes and might have hiring and firing decisions at a place like Defamation because they might or might not own a studio and have some influence over the casting decisions. Those people would have certainly known that Vic had a contract with Defamation, and if they made some specific attempts, like say got together with a bunch of voice actors and behind the scenes tried to get him fired from his job and then he was actually fired, that might be tortious interference with the contract, and it might be pretty easy to prove that all of those people knew exactly what they were doing. But I'm just hypothesizing here. I don't actually know if any of this happened. I just have my thoughts about what might have happened. Sakaki Onsai says, could charges of collusion also be added in? Specifically thinking of voice actors and con chairs possibly colluding to prevent Vic from conventions. Yes, they absolutely could. They absolutely could. Okay, Finn Frog says, did you see my previous super chat about Vic not showing in the Broly Blu-ray on Amazon? No, I did not. I did not see that. But if Funimation happens to see this live stream, I sure hope they, follow up on that one as well. Because they said they're going to follow up and get it corrected on Apple. I would hope they follow up and get it corrected on Amazon. It's weird that Vic seems to be falling off of a lot of these things on these different websites just by happenstance, an accident today. But I don't know. I don't know why that would happen. Devil Trigger DMC says, hey, Nick, not sure if you can answer this, but just wanted to ask, who would all be held liable in this whole situation on the Kick Vic side? It's hard to say at this point, but I would certainly suggest that there are many voice actors, 2 companies that are definitely able to be held liable. Anime News Network, IO9, I think both of them are able to be held liable. Kalen Saucedo, I think if she doesn't have a giant target printed on her forehead, I'd be very, very surprised. That's I think that's about it for right now. Someone says Richie Gonzalez says you can block or mute a deposition, right? No, nope, you can't. You cannot. All right. Does anybody here have any final questions? The panel's kind of coming to a close, and I do want to make sure to answer them. Otherwise, I'll just talk about my 2 panels tomorrow. Yes, in the back. I am Rekieta Law on YouTube. Yeah. So it's REKIETALAW. So yeah, and like I said, I cover all sorts of legal topics, but I've been covering the Vic Mignogna situation very heavily over the past 2 weeks. Yeah, I also cover issues in comics, legal issues in comics, like if you guys are aware of comics, Richard Meyer versus Mark Wade is a big lawsuit that's been going on for several months now, and I've been covering that. And actually, we should see some movement on that very soon, if that's within your interest. I guess the final thing I would like to talk about tonight is just my 2 panels tomorrow. They will be at noon and 5, I believe, are the 2 panel times. I will tweet out before both of them with links to the show. I will attempt to live stream them, and I'll try and fix the upload rate on here to make sure that the live streams are a little smoother. I do think I can fix that on my end. And John Doe asks, what is Shane's favorite brand of shoe to eat? I don't know, but I think the real problem with Shane is that since Payless Shoes is closing down, I don't know where he's going to get his meals next. Clarice Knox says, would defaming someone to the point of suicide in a target be considered attempted murder if they own an instruction book that mentions the possibility? There's only been 1 case of induction to suicide that was successful. It was that criminal case where the girl convinced her boyfriend. Well, I say convinced. The state says that the girl convinced her boyfriend by text message to go ahead and get in his truck and run it in his garage until he did die. She was convicted and found guilty. I don't know if there would be a civil cause of action for that or not, but I do think that you could bring a wrongful death cause of action if that were to happen. Thank God, of course, that has not happened, and it is really a shame, and it's certainly a possibility with the way these things are going, where when you ruin someone's career and their reputation, that's certainly on the table for some people, and I would encourage those people not to look at it that way. There is always hope, and there are ways out of these things. People are more loyal and willing to listen as long as you're willing to stand up. So please do. Finally, Clarice Knox asks, is the rumor that the DAMN, which is, I think, Destroy a Man Now, or something like that, book being used as a playbook for Vic's accusations are true, which has examples of pushing victims to suicide? Could Vic's case end up being moved to criminal court? I highly, highly doubt it. I highly doubt that. That seems very, very unlikely. All right, guys. Let me wrap this up. Tomorrow, I will be doing 2 panels. Again, I believe the times are noon and 5 o'clock. I will talk more about the Vic Mignogna situation. If you have specific questions that you think would be relevant to the panel, if you could tweet or I guess direct message me on Twitter or email those to me, and I would be happy to try and address them. Otherwise, I will probably talk a little bit about the Todd Haberkorn situation as well as the Vic situation, because I think those 2 situations are about to get tied together in real tangible ways. That'll be very, very interesting to watch going forward. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Just so you guys know, here we had 3,500 people watching this live. I want to encourage you guys to check out CONmunity's webpage. If you're watching and you're in the area, definitely come check out CONmunity tomorrow or Sunday. They have been wonderful to me. They have a great convention going, and definitely follow them to see where their next convention will be. For now, let's wrap this up. One last thing. Mithrin Emrys says, to clarify, You're just speculating based on your own experience and knowledge gained in law school and practice, correct? Oh, absolutely. I don't know. I do not know the actual specifics about what is happening behind the scenes or anything like that. Oh, and Brandon B tells me to advertise New Project 2 / Rekieta Law, which is a platform similar to Patreon, newproject2.com / Rekieta Law. If you want to have access to my Discord and stuff, go check that page out, and that's where that goes. Since I'm bad at advertising things, yeah. Yes, I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, because we have limited time for the panel, that I'm trying to only do super chats that are related specifically to questions here. I saw. Let me see if I can find the guy who mentioned that real quick. Here we go. Ryuk52109, I found it. Any show with him in it is no longer available on Google Play. Full Metal Alchemist, which I did hear from Defamation that they do not own the rights to Full Metal Alchemist yet, so that's kind of interesting. Plus, Full Metal Alchemist, a series and films, and OHSHC, which I have no idea what that is. Could this be tortious interference with a contract? No, but it could be breach of contract, depending on if that information came from Funimation or from someone else, and depending on what the contract said. I don't know what those contracts say, but in either case, whoever removed him from the credits, that's a bad move. Very, very dumb. Easy to show actual malice if you're willing to remove him from from credits of shows that he actually performed on. That would be, and if these companies were based in LA, maybe I'll talk about this tomorrow. These companies are based in Texas, and there's a very good reason that these pro-social justice companies are based in Texas, and it kind of runs afoul of all of their perceived notions and all of the ways they present themselves as companies. It's very, very interesting that they located in Texas as opposed to LA. So I'll talk about that at a panel tomorrow. I think that'll make for some good discussion. Thank you all for watching. I'm going to close it down. Like I said, I'll mention on Twitter tomorrow when we have panels going on. Y'all have a good night. Peace.